Hey guys, tonight we are going to get our hands a little dirty and perhaps a little bloody as we wade into the murky, desperate, and surprisingly sticky world of medieval romance. We aren't talking about knights in shining armor reciting sonnets to damsels in towers. We're talking about the real stuff, the kind of love that requires a needle, a pig's organ, and a complete disregard for hygiene. You're going to witness how regular people, bakers, and blacksmiths tried to hack the chemistry of attraction using the only tools they had, bodily fluids and root vegetables. And honestly, considering the hygiene standards of the 14th century, you probably won't survive this without at least a mild sympathetic infection. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love imagining these stories playing out in bedrooms from Hanoi to Helsinki. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in the center of a village that history has politely forgotten. It's night, or at least the heavy, suffocating version of night that exists before streetlights, where the darkness feels like a physical weight pressing against your eyelids. The air smells complicated, a dense, layered perfume of wood smoke, unwashed wool, damp thatch, and the unmistakable sharp tang of animal manure. It's the smell of humanity before plumbing, earthy and overwhelming. You look down at your feet. You're wearing boots that are less like footwear and more like leather bags tied around your ankles, and they are currently sinking into the mud. In this world, love isn't a feeling you catch across a crowded room. It's a resource. It's a commodity you bargain for, hunt down, or in tonight's case, manufacture. You see, the people sleeping in these wattle and daub cottages don't view attraction as a psychological state. To them, emotions are physical things, liquid things, sloshing around inside the body like wine in a wineskin. If you want someone to love you, you don't need to be charming or funny. You just need to adjust their fluids. It's less like dating and more like amateur plumbing. We are drifting toward the back of the village bakery. The ovens are cold now, but the air inside still holds the ghost of burnt flour and yeast. Inside, lit by a single, sputtering tallow candle that smells faintly of beef fat, is Eloise. Eloise is a baker, a woman whose life is defined by the rhythm of rising dough and the heat of the fire. But tonight, she isn't interested in bread. She is interested in the cooper. The cooper, the man who makes barrels, is a sturdy figure, mostly because his job involves wrestling oak planks into circles all day. He has the kind of forearms that feature heavily in Eloise's daydreams. But the cooper is oblivious. He walks past the bakery every morning, staring at his boots, thinking about hoops and staves, completely unaware that he is the target of a high-stakes biological siege. Eloise has decided that waiting for fate is inefficient. She's going to force the issue. You watch as she prepares her workspace. It's not a sterile clinic. It's a flour-dusted table where she usually kneads rye. She pushes aside a rolling pin and lays out a scrap of parchment. Paper is expensive, a luxury item, so this scrap is precious. It's jagged, stiff, and probably cost her a week's wages. It's the medieval equivalent of buying a premium subscription to a dating app, except instead of swiping right, you have to bleed on it. Eloise reaches for a small, sharp needle. It's iron, slightly rusted near the eye because tetanus is just a rumor at this point in history. She doesn't hesitate. You might wince imagining the sharp pinch, But Eloise is a medieval woman. She deals with burns, cuts, and the constant ache of manual labor daily. A little prick on the finger is nothing compared to the heartache of being ignored by a barrel maker. She pierces the skin of her left index finger. A single, bright crimson bead wells up. In the flickering candlelights, it looks almost black. To us, this is just blood, a mix of plasma and cells. But to Eloise, and to everyone in this village, this is potent magical fuel. It is the essence of her life force, the literal liquid of her soul. By taking this blood and applying it to the spell, she believes she is physically binding her life to his. It's a serious commitment. Imagine if, to send a text message, you had to donate a pint of blood. You'd probably think twice about sending that "you up" text at 2 a.m. She leans over the parchment. The room is silent except for the scratching of a rat in the rafters and the wind whistling through the ill-fitting shutters. With a focus that she usually reserves for braiding challah, she smears the blood onto the rough paper. She isn't writing a letter. Most people here can't read, and even if they could, the spirits that govern love magic aren't interested in grammar. She draws symbols, crude, jagged shapes that have been passed down in whispers from grandmother to granddaughter. A circle for unity, a line for direction, a chaotic scribble that represents the Cooper's currently uncaptured heart. Historians still argue whether these specific symbols were derived from ancient pagan runic systems or if they were just arbitrary doodles that someone's great-aunt invented to make the ritual look more professional. It's entirely possible that Eloise is just drawing the medieval equivalent of a smiley face, but she imbues it with terrifying seriousness. She folds the parchment once, twice. The blood acts as the seal, sticking the layers together as it dries. It's sticky, tacky, and undeniably gross. But in her mind, as the blood dries, the spell hardens. It becomes a contract. She whispers the Cooper's name into the folded paper. Cooper, she breathes, which isn't actually his name, but his job title. Yet in a village this small, your job is your identity. It's like falling in love with someone and whispering "senior marketing associate" into a candle. Now comes the delivery method. You watch as she slips the folded, blood-stained packet into her apron pocket. She blows out the candle, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The smell of the extinguished wick, acrid smoke, fills the space. She opens the door and steps out into the mud. You follow her. The cold hits your face like a wet towel. She moves stealthily, avoiding the loose stones in the path. Her destination is a specific tree on the edge of the village common. Trees are important in this worldview. Their roots go deep into the underworld. Their branches touch the heavens. They are the antennas of the magical world, broadcasting signals to the spirits. Eloise needs to bury this packet under the roots of an oak tree, specifically on the side facing the Cooper's workshop. As she digs into the cold, wet earth with her bare hands, you realize the sheer effort involved in this romance. There is no instant gratification here. This is slow-motion magic. She claws at the dirt, breaking her fingernails, panting slightly in the cold air. She places the blood packet into the hole and covers it up, patting the mud down flat so no one will notice the disturbance. The theory is simple. As the parchment decays into the earth, the blood will seep into the roots. The tree will absorb Eloise's essence, and somehow, through a mechanism that no one can quite explain, this energy will travel through the ground, up into the Cooper's floorboards, and zap him with irresistible affection. It's a wireless network made of dirt and hemoglobin. She stands up, wiping her muddy hands on her apron. A dog barks in the distance, a lonely, hollow sound. Eloise looks toward the Cooper's house, a dark shape against the slightly lighter sky. She feels a sense of grim satisfaction. She has done the work. She has paid the blood price. Now she just has to wait for the universe to do its job. She doesn't know yet that the universe has a very strange sense of humor, and that meddling with the biological machinery of love often produces results that are less happily ever after and more medical emergency. She turns back toward the bakery, her boots squelching in the mud, leaving behind a buried secret that is about to wreak absolute havoc on the local barrel industry. You follow her back, the cold wind nipping at your ears, knowing that tomorrow morning things are going to get very, very weird. The sun rises over the village, not with a glorious burst of golden light, but with the reluctant gray enthusiasm of a damp wool blanket being pulled off a bed. The air shifts from freezing to merely cold. You can hear the morning soundtrack of the medieval world booting up, the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of a flail hitting grain, the screech of a rooster that sounds like it has a heavy smoking habit, and the groan of wooden cartwheels that haven't seen grease since the last crusade. You are standing near the village square, close to the oak tree where Eloise buried her blood-soaked parchment just hours ago. The dirt looks undisturbed to the naked eye, but you know better. You know that beneath the surface, the magical radiation is supposedly leaking into the groundwater. Across the muddy path, the Cooper's workshop is already open. The Cooper, let's call him Barnaby, because he looks like a Barnaby, is awake. He is a man built out of right angles and calluses. He is currently wrestling a barrel stave, steaming the wood to make it pliable. The smell of wet, hot oak is pleasant, like a sauna for lumberjacks. Barnaby feels fine. He had a bowl of pottage for breakfast, which is essentially hot grain sludge, and he is ready to face the day. He has no idea that his internal emotional wiring has been reconfigured by a baker with a needle. The trouble begins at approximately 8 a.m. Barnaby steps out of his workshop to get some fresh air. He wipes the sweat from his forehead with a forearm the size of a ham. At that exact moment, the miller's wife walks by. She is carrying a basket of eggs and is about 60 years old. She is not the intended target of the spell, but magic, much like early Wi-Fi, has connectivity issues and tends to broadcast on an open channel. Eloise's spell was meant to make Barnaby swoon with love. Unfortunately, swoon is a vague medical term. The magic interprets this instruction literally. Barnaby looks at the miller's wife. His eyes widen. The blood drains from his face so fast it's as if someone pulled a plug in his heels. His knees, sturdy joints that have supported him while lifting heavy casks of ale, suddenly turn into jelly. Without a sound, he tips forward. It's a slow, majestic fall, like a great tree being felled in a silent forest. He hits the mud with a wet, heavy thud that vibrates through the soles of your boots. The miller's wife screams, dropping her basket. Eggs shatter. The yellow yolks mix with the brown mud, creating a sort of accidental omelet on the village thoroughfare. You watch as a small crowd gathers. Medieval first aid is less about CPR and more about shouting and slapping. Someone throws a bucket of cold well water onto Barnaby's face. He sputters, coughs, and blinks his eyes open. He looks confused. He sits up, shaking his head, looking like a computer that has just rebooted after a critical error. I felt a sudden overwhelmedness, he mumbles, grasping for words. At this moment, a milkmaid walks past the perimeter of the crowd to see what the commotion is about. Barnaby's eyes lock onto her. The spell parses the visual input. Woman detected. Initiate swoon protocol. His eyes roll back into his head. He collapses backward this time, splashing into the puddle he just created. It is slapstick comedy performed with deadly seriousness. From the bakery doorway, Eloise is watching. You can see her peeking out, flour on her cheek. She looks horrified. This isn't the longing gazes and poetry result she was hoping for. This is narcolepsy. She has essentially installed a glitch in his operating system, where if woman visible, messaging system dot crash. The villagers, naturally, assume he is possessed or dying. In the Middle Ages, almost any sudden medical issue was attributed to an imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The local barber surgeon, who doubles as the dentist, and the guy who cuts your hair, pushes through the crowd. He looks at Barnaby, who is currently unconscious in the mud, and nods sagely. Too much blood around the heart, the barber declares, with the confidence of a man who owns a very sharp knife. The heat of the fairer sex is boiling his ventricles. Historians actually debate whether lovesickness or armor heroes was considered a genuine mental illness or a somatic disease during this period. Many medical texts from the era treated intense romantic attraction as a legitimate pathology, with symptoms ranging from insomnia to overheating. So Barnaby isn't just being dramatic, he is technically suffering from a recognized acute medical condition, albeit one induced by a magical parchment buried under a tree. They wake him up again, this time by burning a feather under his nose. The smell of singed keratin is sharp and awful. It's the smelling salts of the 14th century. Barnaby coughs, waving his hands. He tries to stand up. He keeps his eyes firmly fixed on his boots. He has realized the pattern. I cannot look, he stammers, shielding his eyes like he's staring into the sun. Eloise, seizing her chance, rushes out of the bakery. Barnaby, are you all right? She cries, hoping her voice alone will trigger the romance without the fainting. She grabs his arm. Barnaby hears her voice. He turns his head, opening his eyes just a slit to see who is helping him. He sees Eloise. The spell recognizes its creator. It decides to amplify the output. Barnaby doesn't just faint. He goes rigid. He stiffens like a board and topples sideways, knocking over a crate of turnips. It is a total system failure. The crowd gasps. Eloise stands there, holding his limp hand, realizing she has accidentally broken the man she loves. She hasn't made him hers. She has made him incompatible with 57% of the human population. As they drag poor Barnaby back into his workshop to let him recover in the safety of darkness, you realize that in the medieval pursuit of love, be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it, but with a terrible user interface. As the village recovers from Barnaby's bouts of vertical instability, and Eloise frantically scrubs flour off her face in a panic, we need to pivot our attention to the biology of this whole operation. Specifically, we need to talk about pigs. You are now walking past the edge of the village, near the sty. The smell hits you first, a pungent, ammonia-rich wall of odor that makes your eyes water. It's the smell of medieval agriculture, unapologetic and fermented. Inside a muddy pen, several large, hairy pigs are rooting around in the muck. These aren't the pink, hairless cartoon pigs you might imagine. These are closer to wild boars, bristly, lean, and possessing a look in their eyes that suggests they know something you don't. In the world of medieval magic, the pig is not just bacon in waiting. It is a biological masterpiece. You see, the local wise women and cunning men operate on a principle called sympathetic magic. This is the idea that things that resemble each other have a magical connection. A walnut looks like a brain, so it cures headaches. A yellow flower looks like bile, so it cures jaundice. And a pig's heart? Well, to the medieval anatomist, who is usually just the local butcher with a creative imagination, a pig's heart looks suspiciously like a human heart. It's roughly the same size. It has valves. It pumps red fluid. And pigs, much like humans, are omnivorous, intelligent, and prone to making loud noises when unhappy. To the villagers, this similarity isn't a coincidence. It's a design feature. It means the pig is a compatible donor for emotional energy. The villagers believe that the heart is the seat of the soul and the generator of emotions. The brain? That's just a cooling mechanism for the blood, a sort of cranial radiator. The heart is where the action is. And since pig hearts are biologically very similar to human hearts, they are viewed as the perfect blank cassettes for recording affection. Let's watch a transaction take place. A young man, let's call him Peter, is haggling with the swineherd. Peter is about 19, has a patchy beard that looks like moss growing on a rock, and is deeply in love with a girl who milks cows 3 villages over. He needs a vessel to transmit his feelings. He can't just send a letter. Literacy is rare, and the postal service is non-existent. He needs a signal booster. "I need a heart," Peter whispers, looking over his shoulder to ensure the priest isn't walking by. The church frowns on this sort of organ-based messaging service. The swineherd nods. He doesn't ask questions. He's the Radio Shack of the occult. "Fresh slaughter this morning," he grunts. "Big sow. Very emotional animal. Squealed a lot. Good for passion." The logic here is fascinatingly flawed. They believe that the animal's temperament remains in the organ after death. A lion's heart would give you courage. A rabbit's heart would make you fast or cowardly. A pig's heart, being from a domestic, family-oriented animal that likes to eat and sleep, is seen as carrying good emotions, warmth, comfort, and domestic stability. It's the live, laugh, love of internal organs. Peter pays 2 silver pennies, a fortune for him, and receives a warm, wet bundle wrapped in a large dock leaf. He holds it carefully, like it's a delicate glass vase. He isn't grossed out. In his world, death and butchery are visible parts of daily life. He's seen chickens headless and sheep-skinned since he was a toddler. Holding a pig heart is just Tuesday. But here is where the science gets weird. The ritual requires Peter to charge the heart. He takes the organ to a quiet spot, usually a shed or a thicket of bushes. He has to whisper his desires into the ventricles. Imagine speaking your deepest romantic vulnerabilities into a bloody tube of muscle. "Let her see me," he whispers into the aorta. "Let her heart beat as this one did." He then has to bury the heart near the target's home, or worse, dry it out, grind it into a powder, and slip it into her drink. Yes, the health code violations are racking up rapidly. The belief is that the pig heart acts as a conduit. It creates a sympathetic link. When Peter's heart beats with love, the pig heart, wherever it is buried, resonates, and that resonance vibrates through the earth to the girl's heart. It's a biological walkie-talkie system. You watch as Peter trudges off into the woods, clutching his leaf-wrapped package. He looks hopeful. He truly believes that this piece of pork anatomy is the key to his happiness. It's tragic and funny and deeply human. We use apps and algorithms to find connection. They used swine offal. The desire is the same. The interface is just much messier. However, there is a catch. Not all hearts are created equal. The bandwidth of the heart depends on the animal. A pig is the gold standard, the fiber optic cable of love magic. But what happens when you can't afford a pig? What happens when you are on a budget and try to run high-speed emotional data through a dial-up connection? That is where things go wrong, because in this village, there are people who try to cut corners. They look at the price of a pig heart, check their empty coin pouches, and think, well, a heart is a heart, right? Does size really matter? This brings us to the cautionary tale of Anton. Anton is standing near the duck pond, eyeing the waterfowl with a calculating stare. He has a crush, but he has no money. He sees a duck. A duck has a heart. A duck is cheap. In his mind, he's found a loophole. He doesn't realize he is about to initiate a series of romantic disasters that will become village legend. As you watch Anton stalk an unsuspecting mallard, you realize that in the world of magical anatomy, you get what you pay for is a law of physics, and Anton is about to pay a very strange price for his thriftiness. We leave the muddy, manure-scented pigsty and follow Anton toward the village pond. It's a peaceful spot, or it would be, if Anton wasn't currently wading through the reeds with the stealth of a drunken bear. The pond is covered in a layer of bright green duckweed, and the air is filled with the gentle quack-quack of mallards who are blissfully unaware of their impending role in local romance. Anton is, how do we put this politely? He is fiscally prudent. In modern terms, he's the guy who reuses tea bags 3 times and steals extra napkins from fast food joints. He's in love with a weaver named Clara, a woman with patience of a saint and eyesight ruined by years of squinting at looms. Anton wants to win her heart, but the market price for pig organs is simply outside his risk tolerance. It's just a pump, Anton mutters to himself, eyeing a particularly plump mallard drake. Blood goes in, blood goes out. Why pay for a pig when a duck is free? You watch as he lunges. There is a splash, a flurry of feathers, and an indignant honk. It's not graceful. Anton emerges from the reeds, wet up to his knees, holding a duck. The bird looks less like a magical sacrifice and more like a very annoyed passenger. Now, we have to talk about the metaphysical properties of ducks. If pigs are the emotional equivalent of a warm, stable family home, ducks are flighty. They are migratory. They float. They paddle frantically beneath the surface while looking calm on top. They are creatures of air and water, not the grounded earthiness of the pig. In the magical logic of the village, using a duck heart is like trying to build a house foundation out of helium balloons. It's technically matter, but it's not going to hold still. Anton, oblivious to these theological nuances, proceeds with his budget ritual. He retreats to his small, drafty hut. He extracts the heart. It's tiny, about the size of a large grape. He looks at it skeptically. It doesn't have the gravitas of a pig heart. It doesn't look like it can hold a lot of heavy emotion. It looks like it could hold maybe a mild crush or a fleeting interest in breadcrumbs. But Anton is committed. He whispers Clara's name to the grape-sized organ. "Clara," he says, "love me like I love you." He dries the heart over his fire. It shrivels up into a hard, dark pebble. His plan is to grind it into a powder and sprinkle it onto a sweet cake he intends to give her. This is the Trojan horse method of love spells, hiding the magic inside a carbohydrate. He bakes the cake. It's a dense, flat thing made of barley flour and honey. He sprinkles the duck heart dust on top like it's powdered sugar. It's a grit that promises eternal devotion. The next day, Anton approaches Clara at the market. She is inspecting a bolt of wool. He offers her the cake. She smiles. She's polite and takes a bite. Anton watches, holding his breath, waiting for the pig heart effect, the deep, grounding anchor of love. Instead, the duck magic kicks in. Almost immediately, Clara's eyes glaze over, but she doesn't look at Anton with deep, soulful longing. She looks distracted. She looks at the sky. She looks at the horizon. She taps her foot. The energy of the duck, migratory, restless, prone to sudden departures, floods her system. I feel... Clara starts, blinking rapidly. I feel like I need to go. Go where? Anton asks, stepping closer, ready for a hug. South, she says firmly, or just away. She drops the half-eaten cake and walks off. She doesn't walk with the slow, deliberate pace of a woman in love. She walks with a waddle, a brisk, purposeful waddle. She wanders away from the market, away from her loom, and just keeps walking. Anton follows her for a bit, confused. She isn't running away from him. She just has zero interest in staying in one place. Her capacity for attachment has been replaced by an overwhelming biological urge to migrate. Anton has accidentally infected his potential soulmate with the spirit of a migratory bird. The failure is spectacular. Clara eventually returns 3 days later, confused and tired, with no memory of why she walked to the next county. She assumes she had a fever. She looks at Anton not with love, but with the vague disinterest a duck has for a rock. But Anton, being Anton, doesn't blame the medium. He blames the dosage. Maybe one wasn't enough, he thinks. Maybe ducks are just weak. I need more ducks. He doesn't realize that he is fighting a losing battle against symbolic taxonomy. He tries again and again. He becomes the serial duck hunter of the village, a man convinced that quantity will overcome quality. You watch him sitting by his fire a few weeks later, plucking yet another bird, surrounded by feathers. He looks tired. The village cats love him. They get the leftovers, but his love life is a train wreck. He is about to embark on a streak of failures that will serve as a warning to every cheapskate sorcerer for generations to come. He is about to learn that when you try to buy love at a discount, you end up paying in chaos. We are now deep into the Anton era of local romance, a period characterized by a sharp decline in the local waterfowl population and a sharp increase in bizarre breakups. Anton, bless his frugal heart, refuses to accept that the medium is the message. He is convinced that the duck heart is a valid conduit. He just hasn't found the right kind of duck, or perhaps the right user manual. Failure number 2 occurs in late spring. Anton has set his sights on a milkmaid named Agnes. Agnes is a sturdy woman who can carry 2 buckets of milk on a yoke without spilling a drop. She is grounded, practical, and exactly the kind of person who should never be exposed to avian magic. Anton decides that the problem with the first spell was the migratory nature of the wild mallard, so he sources a domestic goose heart. A goose, he reasons, stays on the farm. It is territorial. It is loud. Surely this will result in a loud, territorial love. He performs the ritual again. He buries the goose heart under Agnes's doorstep. He waits. The result is intense. The next morning, Agnes comes out of her house. She sees Anton waiting by the fence. The spell takes hold, but a goose doesn't love the way a human loves. A goose loves by honking aggressively and chasing away rivals. Agnes sees Anton and immediately feels a surge of possessive rage. She doesn't run into his arms. She charges him. She grabs him by the collar and starts shaking him. "You are mine," she shouts, but it sounds less like a declaration of romance and more like a threat. For the next 3 days, Anton cannot go anywhere without Agnes patrolling a 10-foot radius around him. If another woman looks at him, Agnes hisses, literally hisses. If he tries to talk to his friends, she pecks at them, metaphorically mostly, but she did slap the blacksmith with a wet dish rag for saying good morning. It is suffocating. It is the overly attached girlfriend meme brought to life by poultry essence. Anton realizes that while he wanted commitment, he didn't want a bodyguard who bites people. He eventually has to dig up the heart and throw it into the river to break the spell. Agnes snaps out of it, looks around confused, and slaps Anton for good measure before storming off. Failure number 3 is where Anton truly hits rock bottom. He decides to try a pigeon heart. Pigeons are symbols of peace, right? Doves are practically the logo of Valentine's Day. Surely a pigeon heart will bring a gentle, cooing, peaceful love. He targets a baker's daughter, Cecily. He grinds the pigeon heart into a fine powder and blows it into the wind when she walks by. It's very artistic. The wind carries the dust. Cecily inhales. The magic binds. The result is pure anxiety. Pigeons are nervous creatures. They twitch. They bob their heads. They fly away at sudden movements. Cecily doesn't fall in love. She becomes terrified of losing him. But not in a "I can't live without you" way. In a "everything is a predator" way. When Anton approaches her, she flinches. She spends their entire date, a walk to the well, looking at the sky, worried about hawks. She can't focus on his conversation because she is too busy scanning the environment for threats. The romance is impossible because she is stuck in a permanent state of high alert flight response. "I just want to hold your hand," Anton says. "Too dangerous," Cecily whispers, eyes wide, looking at a passing butterfly with suspicion. The world is full of peril. She eventually breaks up with him because he moves too fast, physically. "You walked around the corner too quickly," she explains, trembling. "It startled my spirit." Anton is now 3 for 3. He sits on a log by the village edge, head in his hands. He has created a migrant, a brawler, and a neurotic wreck. He has realized that the animal kingdom is not a toy box of interchangeable parts. Each heart carries the ghost of the creature's instincts. But this brings us to a critical supply chain issue. If pigs are expensive and birds are disastrous, what is left? What happens when the village runs out of pigs? Or when a famine hits and eating the pig is more important than using its heart for dating? The villagers, in their desperation, start looking for substitutes. If they can't use the heart, the hardware, can they just use the fluid, the software? Can they just use blood? But human blood is precious. You can't go around draining yourself every time you have a crush. You'll get anemia. So the magical innovators of the village start looking for blood substitutes. They need something red, liquid, and vital. This leads them to the largest, strongest animal in the village, the ox. The ox is the tractor of the medieval world. It pulls the plow. It is slow, incredibly strong, and endures endless hardship without complaint. The villagers reason. If a pig heart gives love, surely ox blood will give strong love, enduring love, love that can pull a heavy plow through a muddy field. You are now standing outside the slaughterhouse, a shed with a drain. The butcher is collecting ox blood in a bucket. It is thick, dark, and smells of iron. It is potent stuff. People start buying vials of this ox blood. They don't drink it, usually. They use it as an ink. They write love letters with it. Even if they can't write, they just draw hearts or crosses. They smear it on doorposts. The logic is sound. Oxen have strong hearts. They don't give up. However, the side effects of ox magic are heavy. Users report that their lovers become incredibly stubborn. They don't just love you, they refuse to move. You ask them to go for a walk, and they just stand there chewing slowly, staring into the middle distance. They become dependable, yes, but also incredibly boring. One woman, after using ox blood to secure a husband, complained to the priest that her new spouse was faithful as a stone and just as talkative. He would come home, sit in his chair, and remain there for 6 hours without speaking, perfectly content, radiating a bovine sense of calm that was slowly driving her insane. He just exists at me, she wailed. But at least ox blood works. It's reliable. It's the Honda Civic of blood magic. But what happens when you can't get ox blood? What happens when you need something red, but you don't want to kill anything? This brings us to the most dangerous substitute of all. The one liquid that looks like blood, acts on the heart, and is readily available in every tavern: red wine. The villagers look at a cup of dark red wine and think, close enough? It's red. It warms you up. It comes from the blood of the grape. Surely this is a valid magical substitute. Oh, how wrong they are. You are about to witness what happens when you confuse biology with enology. You are about to see why using alcohol as a magical binding agent is a recipe for social disaster. But before we pop the cork on the wine-based disasters, we have to take a detour to the heavy industrial sector of magic. We have to talk about the nuclear option of biological fluids. We have to talk about the ox. You are standing in the muddy courtyard of a blacksmith's shop. The air here tastes like iron filings and singed hair. The blacksmith, a man whose shoulders look like they were carved out of granite, is wiping his hands on a rag that is stiffer than a board. He isn't making horseshoes today. He is dispensing advice to a weeping woman named Ilara. Ilara's husband isn't ignoring her. He's leaving. He's been conscripted to fight in one of those vague, nameless border skirmishes that characterize medieval politics. Wars that are essentially arguments between two cousins who happen to own armies. Ilara doesn't need a love spell to make him swoon. She needs a love spell to make him survive. She needs a spell that grants endurance, thick skin, and the ability to trudge through mud without complaining. She needs the ox. As we mentioned, the villagers operate on sympathetic magic. If a pig is for domestic bliss and a duck is for, well, accidental migration, the ox represents the ultimate strong heart. The ox is the medieval tank. It pulls the plow through clay that would break a horse's leg. It stands in the freezing rain without shivering. It has a heart that beats with the slow, rhythmic power of a hydraulic pump. Ilara doesn't want her husband to be a romantic poet. She wants him to be a tank. You watch as she hands the blacksmith a small clay jar. He nods solemnly and walks over to a bucket in the corner. We won't dwell on the collection method. Let's just say the local butcher and the blacksmith have a trade agreement, but he fills the jar with thick, dark, coagulated ox blood. It is heavy. It sloshes with a viscosity that suggests power. Ilara takes it like she's receiving a holy relic. She rushes home to perform the ritual. She doesn't smear it on parchment. That's too flimsy. She smears it on the inside of her husband's boots. She paints a line of it on the back of his leather jerkin. She is literally armoring him in the essence of stubborn survival. "Come back," she whispers, not with the desperation of a lover, but with the command of a drover speaking to cattle. "Be strong, be an ox." The result of this magic is technically a success, but socially awkward. The source text tells us that ox blood is used because of the strong heart, and in this case, the magic works too well. Her husband goes off to war. He survives. Arrows bounce off his leather jerkin, or maybe he just doesn't notice them. He marches for 3 days without sleep. He eats hardtack that would crack a normal man's teeth. But when he returns, he hasn't just adopted the ox's strength, he's adopted its personality. He walks into the house, covered in mud, and stands in the middle of the room. He doesn't embrace Ilara. He doesn't cry. He just stands there, breathing slowly through his nose, radiating a massive, silent energy. When she asks him how the war was, he just chews his bread slowly, staring at the wall for 40 minutes. He has become a man of few words and heavy footsteps. He is dependable, unbreakable, and about as conversationally stimulating as a fence post. Ilara has saved his life, but she has turned her dynamic, laughing husband into a biological tractor. This is the trade-off of the strong heart. You get stability, yes. You get a love that will not falter, that will pull the plow until the sun goes down. But you lose the spark. You lose the human fragility that makes romance exciting. This leads the village philosophers to a difficult conclusion. Blood is too literal. Animal blood carries too much baggage. The pig's hunger, the duck's flight, the ox's silence. They need a fluid that is red, vital, and carries the essence of joy, not just survival. They need a liquid that makes people happy, giddy, and loose-limbed. And what red liquid makes people happier than anything else? You follow the gaze of the village sorcerer toward the tavern. You see the barrels rolling in. You smell the yeast and the tannins. And you realize that the next great leap in magical technology is about to be a drunken catastrophe. You are now entering the dim, candlelit laboratory of a man who calls himself the Great Sorcerer, though his neighbors just call him Julian the Drunk. Julian is a man of vision, specifically double vision. Julian has identified the supply chain issue we discussed earlier. Human blood is painful to harvest. Animal blood comes with unwanted side effects. See, the goose incident. So Julian proposes a radical theory. Why use blood at all? Why not use the blood of the earth? Why not use red wine? It makes perfect sense to him. Wine changes people. You drink a glass and you feel warm. You drink 2 and you feel affectionate. You drink 3 and you love everyone. Therefore, wine is basically liquid love. It is a pre-mixed potion of infatuation. Julian decides to test this theory on himself. He is in love with a woman named Isabella. Isabella is way out of his league. She owns 3 cows and has all her teeth. Julian, on the other hand, owns a robe with stains on it and a collection of empty bottles. He prepares the ritual. He takes a bottle of the village's finest red, which is essentially vinegar with delusions of grandeur, and pours it into a silver chalice. He doesn't prick his finger. He pricks the cork, a little sorcerer humor there. He chants over the wine. He imbues it with his desire. He asks the spirits of the vine to bind Isabella to him. Let her drink of this, he mutters, swaying slightly, and let her see me as a king. He bottles this enchanted vintage and sends it to Isabella as a gift. It's a bold move. Isabella receives the wine. She is delighted. Free alcohol is the universal language of gratitude in the 14th century. She decides to open it that very evening at a family gathering. She pours a glass. She drinks. Now remember, the intention of the spell was to act as a blood substitute to create a binding love. But wine is chemically active. It doesn't just sit in the system, it intoxicates. The magic latches onto the alcohol molecules. It supercharges the drunkenness. Isabella takes one sip, and the spell hits her like a freight train. Her cheeks flush. Her eyes sparkle. She is suddenly filled with an overwhelming, expansive sense of love. She stands up, glass in hand, feeling the universe swirling around her. She looks across the room. She is supposed to see Julian, who is peeking through the window, but Julian isn't in the room. Who is in the room? Her cousin, though, Gilbert. Gilbert is eating a chicken leg. He looks up, grease on his chin. The magic, riding the wave of alcohol, doesn't care about genetics or social taboos. It just says, target acquired, deploy affection. Isabella's brain, now marinating in enchanted Merlot, decides that Gilbert is the most beautiful man she has ever seen. She stumbles over to him. She ignores the chicken leg. She grabs his face. "Oh, Gilbert," she slurs. "Your eyes. They are like stew." Julian, watching from the window, is horrified. "No," he whispers. "Wrong target. Recalibrate." But you can't recalibrate a drunk person. The source text tells us the disastrous result. The sorcerer who used wine caused his lover to get drunk and marry her cousin. It happens fast. In her magically induced stupor, Isabella demands a wedding. The local hedge priest, who has also had a bit of the wine, shrugs and says, "Why not?" It's a disaster of biblical proportions. By the time the wine wears off the next morning, Isabella wakes up with a throbbing headache, a ring on her finger, and a husband who is genetically similar enough to be a problem. Julian retreats to his lab, defeated. He realizes that wine is an unreliable variable. It creates loose love. It creates sloppy, uncoordinated affection that spills over onto the nearest available object. He writes in his journal, in very shaky handwriting, that wine is a treacherous fluid that should be reserved for drinking, not casting. This failure sends the magical community back to the drawing board. They are running out of red liquids. They've tried blood, too messy, animals, too behavioral, and wine, too drunk. They need something natural, something red, something that comes from the earth but doesn't make you marry your relatives. They turn their eyes to the vegetable garden. They see a root, a dark, blood-red, bulbous root that stains everything it touches. The beetroot. It seems perfect. It bleeds like a man. It grows in the dirt. It is cheap. Surely nothing can go wrong with a vegetable. Oh, you have no idea. We move now from the intoxicating failures of the tavern to the quiet, earthy disappointment of the vegetable garden. If you have ever prepared a beetroot in your kitchen, you know exactly why the medieval mind leaped to the conclusion that this root vegetable was a magical. When you slice into a raw beet, it doesn't just drip, it bleeds. It releases a dark crimson fluid that stains your hands, your cutting board, and your soul with a color that is disturbingly identical to oxygenated blood. To the frugal sorcerer, this visual similarity is a eureka moment. Why risk infection with a needle? Why haggle with a butcher for pig parts? Why get drunk on wine? Here is a vegetable that pulls blood directly from the soil. It is the vegan alternative to dark magic. The villagers call it the Earth's Pulse. They convince themselves that the beetroot contains the life force of the ground itself. It is heavy, dense, and dirt encrusted. Surely it holds some deep geological power? So the beetroot era of magic begins. But almost immediately, the practitioners discover a critical flaw in their logic. While pig blood carries animal instinct and human blood carries the soul, beetroot juice carries, well, nothing. It carries the essence of a root vegetable. It carries the energy of sitting very still in the dirt and waiting to be boiled. It is, as the records state, an unreliable blood substitute. Consider the case of the village healer, a woman named Martha, who is tired of buying leeches. She decides to use beetroot juice to cast a simple binding spell to fix a broken fence. The logic is, blood binds life, so fake blood should bind wood. She paints the fence posts with the purple juice. She chants the incantations of structural integrity. The next morning, the fence hasn't mended itself. Instead, the wood has turned a vibrant, shocking pink. And worse, it has started to sprout. The magic didn't understand bind the wood. It understood feed the plant. The dead wood of the fence, confused by the influx of root energy, tries to come back to life. It grows awkward, leafy shoots. Martha now has a fence that looks like a salad bar and offers zero structural protection against wandering sheep. Then there is the incident involving a man trying to cure his baldness. He reads that blood revitalizes. He refuses to smear real blood on his head. He has limits, so he uses a poultice of crushed beets. He sleeps with this purple mush on his scalp, dreaming of flowing locks. He wakes up not with hair, but with a head that is stained a permanent, indelible purple. He looks like a bruised plum. The beetroot juice doesn't revitalize the follicles. It just dyes the skin with the persistence of industrial paint. For the next 6 months, he has to wear a hat, not to hide his baldness, but to hide the fact that he looks like he lost a fight with a root vegetable. But the most significant failure of beetroot magic, and the one that proves it causes mishaps unrelated to love, happens when a sorcerer tries to use it for a weather spell. He wants rain. He pours the beet juice onto a fire, expecting the red smoke to summon storm clouds, red sky in morning, sailors take warning, etc. The beet juice hits the fire. It doesn't summon rain. It creates a thick, sweet, cloying steam that smells like burning sugar and damp earth. The cloud doesn't rise to the heavens. It settles into the village. For 3 days, the entire hamlet smells like a cafeteria kitchen. The bees go crazy. The ants mobilize in legions. The sorcerer hasn't summoned a storm. He has summoned every insect within a 5-mile radius. The villagers learn a hard lesson. You cannot cheat the laws of magical exchange with a salad ingredient. The beetroot has no passion. It has no heartbeat. It is chemically boring. When you ask it to perform the heavy lifting of love or destiny, it just shrugs and stains your tablecloth. And yet, despite these vegetative failures, there is always one man who thinks he can do it better. One man who believes that the problem isn't the ingredients, but the combination. He believes that if you just stack enough magical items on top of each other, like layers in a sandwich, you can force the universe to cooperate. This brings us to Gerald. Gerald is about to take all the bad ideas we've discussed, the blood, the pig heart, the vegetables, and combine them into a grand unified theory of romance. And he is going to add one final, fatal ingredient: poetry. Gerald is a man who does not believe in half measures. If you were to look at his cottage, you'd see he has 3 horseshoes over the door, just in case the first 2 don't work. He wears garlic around his neck, carries a rabbit's foot, and crosses himself whenever a black cat, or a particularly dark gray one, walks by. He is a maximalist in a minimalist world. Gerald is in love with Alfreda. Alfreda is a woman of practical tastes who likes sturdy baskets and dry firewood. She is not, by nature, a romantic. But Gerald is convinced that he can overwhelm her indifference with a shock and awe campaign of sorcery. He sits at his table, surrounded by the debris of his ambition. He has analyzed the failures of his neighbors. He knows Eloise failed because she only used blood, too specific. He knows Anton failed because he used the wrong animal. Ducks are too flighty. He knows the beetroot users failed because vegetables lack a soul. So Gerald's plan is to create a magical cocktail. He will use human blood for the personal binding, a pig's heart for the warm, domestic emotional conduit, poetry to give the spell specific verbal instructions so there are no misunderstandings. It seems foolproof. It's a multi-factor authentication for love. He starts with the poetry. Now Gerald is not a bard. He is a man who fixes wagons. His grasp of rhyme is forced. He dips his quill into a pot of ink. Sadly, not the magical oxblood ink, just regular squid ink, which smells like low tide. He writes on a scrap of parchment, "Alfreda, my dove, by the stars above, accept this heart and never part." It's not Shakespeare, but he hopes the magic will grade on a curve. Next, the biology. He acquires a pig heart. It's fresh, heavy, and slick. He pricks his finger, he's used to this part by now, and smears his own blood onto the pig heart, effectively signing the organ. He then wraps the pig heart in the poem. He ties it all together with a piece of red string. Now, he needs a delivery system. He can't just hand her a bloody heart wrapped in bad poetry. That's a great way to get arrested, even in the Middle Ages. He needs a vessel, a gift. He looks around his kitchen. He sees a beautiful, woven basket filled with his best crop of the season, turnips. Turnips are the staple of the medieval diet. They are reliable, sturdy, and unpretentious. Alfreda loves turnips. She makes a mean stew. It's a thoughtful, practical gift. Gerald's idea is to hide the spell inside the gift. He burrows a little hole in the center of the pile of turnips. He nestles the blood-smeared, poem-wrapped pig heart deep in the bottom of the basket, hidden beneath layers of root vegetables. His logic is, Alfreda will accept the basket. She will bring it into her home. The magic, radiating from the heart at the bottom, will percolate up through the turnips and hit her when she cooks them. The turnips are just the packaging. They are the cardboard box of the delivery. He picks up the basket. It's heavy. He feels a surge of confidence. He walks to Alfreda's house in the twilight. The wind is rustling the trees, whispering what he thinks are omens of success. He knocks on her door. Alfreda opens it. She looks tired but pleased to see fresh produce. "For you," Gerald says, trying to sound mysterious, but mostly sounding out of breath. "A gift, from my heart and my garden. Elfrida takes the basket. Oh, Gerald, turnips. They are very firm. Keep them close, Gerald whispers, winking awkwardly. They hold a secret. He leaves, feeling like a genius. He goes home and waits for the spell to take effect. He imagines Elfrida swooning. He imagines her running to his door, driven by the irresistible power of the pig heart and the rhyming couplet. But Gerald made a critical error in magical syntax. Magic is literal. Magic follows the path of least resistance. Gerald cast a spell of intense love and adoration. He placed the source of that spell, the heart poem, inside a container of turnips. The magic seeps out of the heart. It looks for the nearest recipient. It looks for the object that is being offered. It doesn't see Elfrida yet. It sees the turnips. The turnips are surrounding the heart. The turnips are absorbing the blood and the poetry. The spell gets confused. It thinks, okay, the target is Elfrida. The subject of the love is these things touching the heart, these round, dirty things. The magic binds the concept of love, not to Gerald, but to the vegetables. Gerald sleeps soundly, unaware that he has just engineered a love triangle between a woman and a root vegetable. He wakes up the next morning expecting a visitor. And indeed, the village is about to witness one of the most confusing romantic entanglements in its history. The sun rises on Elfrida's cottage, casting a pale, dusty light through the cracks in her shutters. Usually, Elfrida is up before the birds, already boiling water and scolding the cat. But today, something is different. Today, the air in her small kitchen feels heavy, charged with a strange, vegetative magnetism. On the table sits the basket Gerald delivered the night before. To the unenchanted eye, it is just a pile of dirt-caked root vegetables. But to Elfrida, under the influence of the misdirected spell, it is the most captivating thing she has ever seen. She approaches the table. She reaches out a hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She picks up the top turnip. It is large, bulbous, and has a little tail of root that looks like a crooked finger. Yesterday, she would have seen this as dinner. Today, she sees it as a masterpiece of nature. She sees a soul trapped in a fibrous exterior. Oh, she whispers, cradling the turnip against her cheek. The cold, rough skin of the vegetable scrapes against her face, but she doesn't mind. She feels a rush of warmth, a deep, resonant affection that starts in her chest and radiates out to her fingertips. You understand me, she murmurs to the turnip. You are so grounded. The spell has worked perfectly in the worst possible way. The pig heart provided the emotional depth. The blood provided the binding. The poetry provided the romantic context. But because the magic filtered through the turnips first, it decided that they were the object of the poem. When Gerald wrote, "Accept this heart," the magic assumed this heart referred to the heart of the turnip. Gerald, meanwhile, is striding down the lane toward her house. He has slicked back his hair with a bit of animal fat, the gel of the era, and put on his cleanest tunic. He is ready to receive his reward. He imagines Elfrida running out the door, flinging her arms around him, declaring that his gift unlocked her hidden passion. He knocks on the door, no answer. He knocks again, louder. "Elfrida, it's Gerald, the vegetable bringer." Still no answer, but he hears a low murmuring from inside. A voice, soft and tender. Panic spikes in his chest. Is she with someone else? Has the Cooper moved in on his territory? Gerald pushes the door open. It was unlatched and steps inside. "Elfrida," he calls out. The scene before him freezes his blood. Alfreda is sitting in her rocking chair near the hearth. She is not alone. She is holding the entire basket of turnips in her lap. She is stroking the leaves of the largest one as if it were a cat. She looks up at Gerald. Her eyes are glassy, filled with a serene, terrifying happiness. She doesn't smile at him. She looks at him with the polite annoyance of a woman who has been interrupted while on a date. "Shh," she hisses, pointing a finger at the basket. They are sleeping. Gerald stands there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The turnips are sleeping? They are exhausted, Alfreda says defensively, pulling the basket closer to her chest. They came all the way from the garden. The journey was hard for them. Look at this one, she says, lifting a small, particularly knobbly turnip. He is so brave. I call him Bartholomeus. Gerald feels the room spinning. Alfreda, it's me, Gerald. I gave you the basket. Remember the secret inside? He is trying to trigger the spell's true target. He wants her to find the heart and the poem. The secret is their beauty. Alfreda sighs, gazing lovingly at Bartholomeus. I never noticed before. The way the purple fades into the white. The texture. It's exquisite. She lifts the turnip to her lips and kisses it, gently, on the dirt. Gerald watches, horrified as the woman he loves makes out with his agriculture. Alfreda, you're supposed to cook them. They're for stew, Alfreda gasps, clutching the vegetables protectively. She looks at Gerald with genuine revulsion. Cook them? You monster? Would you boil an angel? Would you peel a friend? They're turnips, Gerald shouts, losing his cool. They don't have friends. They belong in a pot with onions. Get out, Alfreda says, her voice cold and hard. She stands up, shielding the basket with her body. We don't need your negativity here. Bartholomeus is sensitive. Gerald is forced to retreat. He backs out of the cottage, watching as Alfreda turns back to the basket, cooing softly, apologizing to the vegetables for the loud man's rude behavior. He walks home in a daze. He has created a monster. He hasn't just failed to win her love. He has replaced himself with a root vegetable. He realizes that he can never compete. He is human. He makes mistakes. He forgets anniversaries. He has bad breath. The turnip is perfect. It is silent. It listens. It never argues. It is the ideal medieval boyfriend. For the next week, the village is treated to the spectacle of Alfreda taking her turnips for a walk. She puts them in a pram, usually reserved for babies, and wheels them around the square. She introduces them to neighbors. This is Bartholomeus, she tells the confused blacksmith. He is very deep. He doesn't say much, but his silence speaks volumes. The spell eventually wears off when the turnips inevitably begin to rot. The tragedy of a vegetable romance is that the shelf life is very short. As Bartholomeus starts to go soft and smell bad, the magic fades. Alfreda wakes up one morning, looks at the pile of mushy, decaying compost in her bed, screams, and throws the whole lot out the window. She has no memory of the romance. She just thinks she had a very strange flu that made her hoard groceries. Gerald never speaks of it. He goes back to fixing wagons, and he never ever eats a turnip again. But if you think falling in love with a vegetable is the peak of embarrassment, you are wrong. At least Alfreda loved something external. At least she directed her affection outward. Our next subject isn't so lucky. She is about to fall victim to a spell that turns the arrow of Cupid into a boomerang. She is about to learn what happens when you get the geometry of magic wrong. When you write your name upside down, the universe doesn't fix your typo, it inverts your reality. We leave the rotting turnips of Gerald's garden and head toward the village well, where the ground is perpetually slick with mud and the air is filled with the sound of dripping water. Here, we find a young woman named Beatrice. Beatrice is sweet, slightly clumsy, and desperately lonely. She has a heart full of love and a head full of very bad ideas. Beatrice has been eyeing the blacksmith's apprentice. He's a nice lad, mostly soot and muscle, but he hasn't noticed her. So naturally, Beatrice decides to bypass the tedious process of conversation and go straight to magical coercion. She acquires the standard spell kit, a scrap of parchment, a charcoal stick, and a drop of her own blood. The instructions she bought from a traveling peddler were clear. Write your name on top, write his name on bottom. Draw the arrow of desire connecting them, bury at crossroads. Simple, right? It's the IKEA furniture assembly of witchcraft. But Beatrice has a problem. She never really learned to write. She knows the shapes of letters, but her spatial reasoning is flexible. She sits at her kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration. She writes her name, Beatrice. It looks good. But then, in her nervousness, she spins the paper around to get a better angle for the apprentice's name. She doesn't realize that in magical syntax, orientation is everything. By rotating the parchment 180 degrees before drawing the connecting line, she has essentially created a closed loop. She hasn't drawn an arrow from A to B, she has drawn a U-turn. She has written her name upside down relative to the arrow of desire, causing the magical trajectory to launch, hit a ceiling, and bounce straight back into the caster. She buries the paper. She goes to sleep, dreaming of the blacksmith's apprentice. She wakes up the next morning. She stretches. She walks over to the wash basin to splash water on her face. As the water settles, she sees her reflection. Usually, Beatrice looks in the mirror and sees a girl with messy hair and a nose she thinks is too big. But today, the spell hits her with the force of a divine revelation. She gasps. "Who?" she whispers, clutching her chest. "Is that?" She leans closer to the water. The girl in the reflection looks back with wide, adoring eyes. Beatrice feels a flush of heat that has nothing to do with the temperature. Her heart starts hammering against her ribs. She has never seen anyone so beautiful, so mysterious, so perfectly compatible with her soul. She forgets the blacksmith's apprentice immediately. Who needs a boy covered in soot when you have her? You watch as Beatrice spends the day in a state of delirious infatuation. But she isn't following a man. She is following herself. She catches her reflection in a polished spoon and giggles. She walks past a shop window and winks at the glass. The villagers start to notice. Usually, when someone is possessed by love magic, they pine away or stare at the object of their affection. Beatrice is wandering around the village square, hugging herself, and not in a "I'm cold" way, in a "I can't keep my hands off you" way. She wraps her arms around her own waist, squeezes tight, and whispers, "You're so funny. Stop it," to absolutely no one. It reaches a peak when you find her by a large puddle near the pigsty. It's a muddy brown pool of water, but to Beatrice, it's a romantic vista. She is kneeling in the mud, oblivious to the stains on her dress. She is holding a bunch of dandelions. She is reciting poetry to the puddle. "Your eyes," she says, staring intensely at her own reflection in the dirty water, "are like, well, they are exactly like mine, but deeper, like two pools of mystery." She drops a flower into the water, shattering the image. She gasps, looking devastated. Don't leave me, she cries. I'll wait for the ripples to settle. I'll wait forever. It is the ultimate love spell reversed. She is cursed to love herself with the intensity of 1,000 burning suns. It's extreme narcissism, weaponized by sorcery. The climax of this self-courtship happens a week later. Beatrice is sitting on a bench, having a heated debate with herself. "Do you think it's too soon?" she asks herself aloud. "No, Beatrice," she answers herself, changing her voice slightly to sound more seductive. "When you know, you know." "You're right," she replies, blushing. "I've never felt this way about anyone." She stands up. She clears her throat. She gets down on one knee. This is physically difficult because she is trying to propose to the person she is currently occupying. She has to sort of twist her body so she can look down at her own hand. "Beatrice," she says, her voice trembling with emotion, "we've known each other our whole lives. You've always been there for me. You're the only one who truly gets my jokes. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The village pauses. The baker stops kneading. The dogs stop barking. Everyone watches to see what she will say. There is a moment of tension. Will she reject herself? Is she out of her own league? "Yes," she screams, jumping up and hugging the air. "1,000 times yes. I thought I'd never ask." The wedding is held 3 days later. It is a logistical nightmare. The priest refuses to officiate, citing that auto-matrimony is not in the handbook. Beatrice doesn't care. She officiates it herself. She stands under the old oak tree. She wears a veil. She walks herself down the aisle, which involves a weird, shuffling sidestep where she tries to be both the bride and the father of the bride simultaneously. "Do you, Beatrice, take Beatrice to be your lawfully wedded wife?" she asks. "I do," she answers. "And do you, Beatrice?" "I do too," she interrupts, too excited to wait. "I kiss the bride." She then proceeds to wrap her arms around her head and smooch the back of her own hand with intense passion. The villagers watch in stunned silence. It is profound in a way. It is the ultimate act of self-love. Beatrice walks off into the sunset, holding her own hand, arguing about where they should go for the honeymoon. She is never lonely again. She is trapped in a feedback loop of affection, the happiest and most insufferable person in the hamlet. But while Beatrice found happiness in a typo, our next subject is not so fortunate. He is a scholar, a man of letters, a man who believes that precision is power. He thinks he is smarter than the illiterate villagers with their pigs and turnips. He decides to translate an ancient, powerful love spell from a crumbling Latin text. He gets one word wrong, just one word. He mistakes the Latin word for answer, responsum, for the word for goose, answer. And let me tell you, the universe knows the difference. And the universe has a lot of geese waiting for an excuse to get involved. We leave the joyous, albeit singular, wedding of Beatrice and step into a place that smells not of mud or turnips, but of dry rot and superiority. You are now in the study of Thomas the Scrivener. Thomas is a man who owns more books than he has friends. In a village where most people sign their names with an X or a thumbprint dipped in soot, Thomas can read Latin, Greek, and a little bit of very broken Hebrew. Thomas looks down on the folk magic we have witnessed so far. He scoffs at Eloise's blood rituals. He rolls his eyes at Gerald's turnips. To Thomas, magic is not a messy biological experiment. It is an exact science. It is like algebra, but with more candles. He believes that the universe is a giant filing cabinet, and if you just file the right request form in the correct language, the cosmos will process your application and send you a wife. He is currently hunched over a desk that is covered in scrolls. The only light comes from a beeswax candle that flickers in the draft, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. Thomas is lonely, but he is also picky. He doesn't want just any wife. He wants the correct wife. He wants the universe to send him a sign. He is looking for an answer. He has found a spell in a crumbling text from the 9th century. The text is faded, the ink turning brown, the parchment eaten away by generations of hungry silverfish. The spell is designed to summon the spirit of revelation to whisper the name of one's true love. The core of the incantation relies on the Latin word for answer or response, which is responsum. However, Thomas is tired. His eyes are straining in the dim light, and the scribe who copied this text 300 years ago had very sloppy handwriting. The R looks a bit like an A. The P is smudged, so to Thomas's sleep-deprived brain, the word doesn't look like responsum. It looks remarkably like answer. Answer is the Latin word for goose. Thomas doesn't realize this. He thinks he is chanting, "O spirits, bring me the answer, bring me the divine response." In reality, he is chanting, "O spirits, bring me the goose, bring me the divine waterfowl." He stands up, clears his throat, and begins the ritual. He is precise. He gestures with his quill. He enunciates every syllable with the confidence of a man who is completely wrong. Veni, veni, answer eternus. He booms into the silence of his study. Come, eternal goose. He finishes the spell and waits. He expects a shimmering light. He expects a disembodied voice to whisper a woman's name, perhaps Matilda or Eleanor. Instead, he hears a flapping sound. It's not the delicate flutter of a dove. It's the heavy, rhythmic whump, whump, whump of significant wingspan. Thomas frowns. He walks to his window and throws open the shutters. There, standing in his garden, illuminated by the moonlight, are 3 geese. They are large, white, and staring up at him with an intensity that is unsettling. Now, usually, geese are agents of chaos. They are the cobras of the bird world, but these geese are under a heavy enchantment. They haven't been summoned to bite. They have been summoned to answer the call of love. The leader of the trio, a particularly sleek bird with a long, elegant neck, locks eyes with Thomas. She lets out a sound. It isn't a honk, it's a soft, throaty murmur, a coo. It is the sound a goose makes when it is trying to be seductive. So Thomas blinks. "Shoo," he says, waving a hand. "I am waiting for a sign." The geese do not shoo. The leader waddles forward, followed by her 2 companions. They are the escorts. They flank her like bodyguards protecting a VIP. They march right up to his front door. Thomas goes downstairs to investigate. He opens the door. The geese waddle in. They don't knock over furniture. They don't hiss. They simply surround him. The lead goose presses her head affectionately against his shin. She looks up at him with unmistakable affection. "What is this?" Thomas asks the room. "I asked for clarity." The universe, in its malicious compliance, has given him clarity. The spell has bound these birds to him. They are now his romantic entourage. Thomas tries to kick them out. He gently nudges them with his foot. They interpret this as playful flirting. The lead goose nibbles his slipper, fluttering her eyelashes. If geese had eyelashes, she would be fluttering them. He retreats to his bedroom. They follow, their webbed feet slapping softly against the wooden stairs. Slap, slap, slap. It is the soundtrack of his doom. He shuts the door. They wait outside, occasionally tapping their beaks against the wood, a polite reminder that they are still there, yearning for him. The next morning, Thomas has to go to the market. He hopes they have lost interest. He opens the door. They are sleeping on his doormat. They wake up instantly, shaking out their feathers, looking at him with pure adoration. He walks to the village square. They follow. They walk in a V formation, with Thomas at the point. He looks like a reluctant general leading a battalion of poultry. The villagers stare. "New pets, Thomas?" the baker asks, grinning. "They are pests," Thomas hisses, trying to walk faster. The geese speed up. If he stops, they stop. If he sits on a bench, the lead goose hops up next to him and rests her head on his shoulder. It is an image of domestic bliss that defies all biological logic. The worst part is the jealousy. If Thomas tries to speak to a human woman, the geese don't attack, they just intervene. They waddle between Thomas and the woman. They look at the woman, then at Thomas, then back at the woman, with a look of profound judgment. They start grooming Thomas's robes, picking off lint, effectively claiming him. "He's taken," their body language says. "Look how well we preen him." The human women, naturally, are weirded out. "Thomas," one says, backing away, "why is that bird looking at me like I stole its husband?" "It's a translation error," Thomas pleads. "It's a philological misunderstanding." But no one listens. Thomas becomes known as the Goose King. He cannot escape their devotion. When he goes to the library, they wait under the window. When he goes to church, they wait in the graveyard, silent and respectful, until he emerges. The lead goose eventually becomes a fixture in his life. He names her Responsum, a bitter joke that only he finds funny. She brings him shiny pebbles. She chases away rats, and in a way, she is a better partner than many humans. She is loyal, protective, and demands nothing but cracked corn and the occasional head scratch. Thomas spends his evenings reading by candlelight, with a goose sleeping on the rug beside him. He realizes that while he didn't get the answer he wanted, he got the answer he deserved. He learned that words have power, and if you aren't careful with your vowels, you might end up married to the farmyard. But Thomas's quiet, feathery domesticity is nothing compared to the public spectacle we are about to witness. Thomas only ruined his own social life. Our next subject is about to ruin an event that involves the entire village. We are going to a wedding that has been planned for months, a wedding that is supposed to be the highlight of the season. But there is a guest coming who has not been invited, a guest named Allergy. And when biology clashes with theology at the altar, the result is what historians call the disaster wedding. Get your best clothes on, but maybe bring an umbrella. It's going to get messy. We leave the quiet, feathered domesticity of Thomas and his geese and head toward the village church. It is a Sunday. The air is crisp and the bells are ringing. But they aren't ringing for a funeral or a feast. They are ringing for a wedding. You are standing in the churchyard. The grass is long and wet, soaking the hem of your tunic. The church itself is a sturdy stone affair, smelling of damp limestone, beeswax, and centuries of guilt. Today, however, it smells of lavender and desperation. The entire village is here. Weddings in the medieval period are not private, intimate gatherings. They are public spectacles. They are community mergers. And this particular merger between a plowman named William and a seamstress named Matilda is the event of the season. William is a good man, but he has a sensitive constitution. He is the kind of man who gets a runny nose if the wind changes direction. Matilda, on the other hand, is a perfectionist. She has stitched her own wedding dress, a feat of needlework that has taken her 3 years and cost her most of her eyesight. She wants this day to be perfect. She wants the vows to be spoken with the gravity of a coronation. To ensure this, Matilda has made a tactical error. She visited a traveling apothecary who sold her a small pouch of lover's dust. The apothecary claimed it was a blend of crushed rose petals and powdered moonlight designed to open the throat and ensure that the vows would be spoken with clarity and passion. Matilda, wanting to be sure it works, has dusted the collar of William's tunic with this powder. She has also sprinkled a generous amount on her own veil. She doesn't realize that the primary ingredient in this lover's dust isn't moonlight. It is dried, pulverized sneezewort, Achillea patarmica, mixed with a significant amount of black pepper to add heat to the union. You follow the couple to the church porch. In the Middle Ages, the actual marriage ceremony, the exchange of vows, often happened right here at the door of the church, in full view of the public and God. The couple stands before the priest. The priest is an elderly man named Father Thomas, no relation to the goose fancier, who likes things to be quick, quiet, and orthodox. Father Thomas opens his book. The crowd hushes. The silence is heavy, broken only by the chirping of a sparrow and the distant bleating of a sheep. "Do you, William?" Father Thomas intones, his voice dry as parchment. "Take this woman." William opens his mouth to say "I do," but he doesn't say "I do," he inhales. The lover's dust on his collar drifts up. The black pepper and sneezewort hit his olfactory nerves with the precision of a sniper, and his face contorts, his eyes water. The pre-sneeze tension builds in his chest, a seismic event waiting to happen. Achoo. The sneeze is violent. It echoes off the stone archway like a gunshot. It is a wet, explosive sound that startles the horses tied up 20 yards away. Now here is where the magic goes wrong. The spell was designed to release words of passion upon the exhalation of breath, but the sneeze disrupts the flow. The magical energy, startled by the explosion, ricochets off William and hits Matilda. Matilda opens her mouth to ask if he is okay, but she doesn't ask. The magic seizes her vocal cords. It interprets passion, not as romantic love, but as high-stakes dramatic tragedy. "The stars bleed upon the altar of time," Matilda shrieks. Her voice isn't her own. It is deep, resonant, and projecting like she's in an amphitheater. The crowd gasps. William wipes his nose, looking terrified. "Excuse me?" Father Thomas asks, blinking. William feels another tickle. The dust is airborne now, a cloud of irritants swirling around his head. Achoo! The sneeze acts as a trigger. It's like hitting the next track button on a playlist of doom. Matilda's head snaps back. "Betrayal is the dagger cloaked in silk," she bellows, her hands gesturing wildly. "The heavens weep for the forgotten kings." It is beautiful poetry. It is iambic pentameter, but it is completely insane in the context of a wedding. "Matilda, stop it," her mother hisses from the front row. But Matilda cannot stop. She is trapped in a call and response loop with her husband's allergies. Achoo. William sneezes, doubling over. "Oh, cruel fate," Matilda cries, tears streaming down her face, "to wither like the autumn leaf before the frost." Historians and linguists have long debated the nature of this event. Some argue It was a case of glossolalia, speaking in tongues, induced by the extreme stress of the wedding. Others suggest it was a rare neurological reaction to the lover's dust, a sort of cross-wiring between the auditory processing and the speech centers. But the villagers just call it the disaster. The scene descends into chaos. Father Thomas tries to regain control. If anyone knows of any impediment, achoo. The serpent coils around the chalice. Matilda screams, pointing an accusing finger at the priest. Father Thomas steps back. I beg your pardon? The void. The endless, screaming void, she continues, her voice cracking with emotion. The guests are oscillating between horror and entertainment. It's like watching an opera where the tenor is having a medical emergency and the soprano is possessed by a ghost. William is trying to hold his nose closed with his fingers. His face is turning red. He looks like he is about to explode. He manages to stifle the next sneeze into a weird, high-pitched squeak. Squeak. The magic is confused by the suppressed trigger. Matilda just whispers this time. Darkness, she murmurs, swaying on her feet. Comes. Father Thomas has had enough. In the medieval world, disrupting a sacrament with talk of voids and serpents is dangerously close to heresy. He snaps his book shut. I am not paid enough for this, he mutters, which is saying something because he is paid in chickens. This is not a wedding. This is an exorcism with bad ventilation. He turns and walks back into the church, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. The sound reverberates through the stunned silence of the churchyard. The couple is left standing there. William is still sneezing, but rhythmically now, like a metronome. Matilda is still reciting verses, but they are getting weirder. The badger knows the secrets of the moon, she says solemnly, as William sneezes into his sleeve. The crowd slowly disperses. They don't throw rice, which is a modern tradition anyway. They just back away slowly, making the sign of the cross. They leave the couple to their accidental collaboration and disaster of design. Eventually, the dust settles. The wind blows the sneezewort away. William stops sneezing. Matilda stops reciting apocalyptical poetry. They look at each other. They are unmarried, exhausted, and humiliated. I think, William says, sniffing loudly, that went well. I sounded very authoritative, Matilda admits, rubbing her throat. They decide to skip the church and just declare themselves married by habit and repute, which is a legitimate medieval legal loophole, basically meaning everyone knows we're together, so let's not bother the priest again. This event teaches the village a valuable lesson. Speech is dangerous. Words, once released, cannot be gathered back up. And adding magical stimulants to a ceremony that already involves high anxiety is a recipe for a theatrical meltdown. But while William and Matilda merely embarrass themselves with words, our next subjects are going to take the concept of magical consumption to a literal level. We are leaving the churchyard and heading into the kitchen. But this isn't a kitchen where they bake bread. This is a kitchen where they cook emotions. We are about to open the pages of a very specific, very dangerous cookbook. A book where the ingredients list includes things you definitely shouldn't eat, and the serving suggestion is infatuation with a side of nausea. Prepare your stomachs. We are about to learn why you should never, ever accept a tart from a sorcerer. We leave the churchyard, where the air is still thick with sneezewort and poetry, and retreat to a place that should be safe, the kitchen. In the medieval home, the hearth is the center of life. It's where you get warm, where you dry your socks, and where you cook your pottage. But in our village, the kitchen is also a laboratory. It is where biology meets gastronomy in a collision that would make a modern health inspector weep. You are standing in the pantry of a particularly ambitious housewife named Elspeth. The room smells of dried sage, onions, and something faintly metallic. Elspeth is holding a book. It is not a printed book. Gutenberg is still a few generations away, but a handwritten manuscript bound in greasy leather. The title, scrawled in fading ink, is deceptively polite. A gentle guide to culinary enchantment and affection. It sounds lovely, doesn't it? It sounds like a collection of recipes for heart-shaped cookies. But as Elspeth opens the pages, you realize that culinary enchantment is a euphemism for dietary bioterrorism. The first recipe she consults is for a tea of binding. It recommends using burnt rice flour as a base. Rice is rare and expensive here, so burning it seems like a waste, but the char is essential for the smoky flavor of passion. However, the secret ingredient isn't sugar or honey. The text instructs the cook to add finely clipped parings of the unguis. That's Latin for fingernails. You watch as Elspeth takes a pair of shears. Snip, snip. The sound is sharp and dry. She collects the crescent-shaped clippings from her own hand. They look like tiny, translucent worms. She drops them into the mortar and pestle. Grind, grind, grind. She pulverizes her own keratin into a fine, gritty powder. The logic is the same as the blood magic. You are putting a piece of yourself into the object of your desire. Literally. You are feeding them your DNA. She sprinkles this personal seasoning into the tea. As the water boils, she has to lean over the steam and whisper her lover's name into the rising vapor. Barnaby, she whispers. It's a popular name. Drink of me. It gives a whole new meaning to homemade. The recipient of this tea thinks they are getting a nice, warm beverage to soothe their throat. In reality, they are drinking a suspension of burnt flour and human fingernails. It's less of a love potion and more of a gritty protein shake. But if you think drinking fingernails is bad, wait until you get to the dessert course. Elspeth turns the page. Her finger traces a recipe for a tart of true longing. This is a pastry. It involves a flaky crust, a filling of orchard fruits, and a glaze of honey. It looks delicious. But the activation requirement is severe. The book demands a single drop of blood, but not from the finger. The finger is for amateurs. The finger is for parchment. For food, for something that will be tasted, the blood must come from the organ of taste itself, the tongue. Elspeth picks up a silver needle. She sticks out her tongue. You wince. The tongue is incredibly vascular and sensitive. This isn't a dull throb. This is sharp, stinging pain. She pricks the surface. A bright red bead wells up. She lets it drip onto the center of the tart before it goes into the oven. The belief is that this creates a dream of infatuation. When the lover eats the tart, the blood magic mingles with the sweetness, bypassing the stomach and going straight to the brain's pleasure centers. But consider the cook. Elspeth has to bake this tart while her tongue is throbbing. She can't even taste her own cooking to see if it's done because her mouth hurts. It is a sacrifice of sensory pleasure for the hope of romantic gain. The tart comes out of the oven, golden and bubbling, carrying a secret biological payload that is both gross and weirdly intimate. But what if you don't want to cook? What if your intended target lives too far away to send a warm tart? What if you want to reach out and touch someone or haunt someone through the mail? We leave Elspeth nursing her sore tongue and travel to the darker side of the village market. Tucked away between a stall selling eels and a stall selling suspect relics is a merchant of inks. This merchant doesn't sell standard ink. He doesn't deal in lampblack or oak gall. He sells specialized fluids for specific emotional outcomes. He is the pharmacist of the written word. On his shelf, in a small crystal vial that catches the light with a menacing glint, is a substance called scarlet hollow. It looks like blood, but it isn't. It is a complex chemical brew. The merchant leans in, his breath smelling of cloves, and whispers the ingredients. It is made from plant dyes for the base. Then he adds crushed beetle shells, specifically the cochineal beetle, which gives a vibrant, permanent red color. This connects the ink to the insect world, scuttling, hard-shelled, persistent. But then the recipe gets metaphysical. The text claims the ink is brewed with heat, ache, and tears. How do you bottle ache? Perhaps it is the sweat of a fever. Perhaps it is distilled vinegar, which mimics the sourness of regret. And the tears? The merchant claims he collects them from widows, but he probably just uses saline solution. However, the intent is what matters. This ink isn't for writing love letters. It is for writing letters of consequence. It is designed for the ex-lover, the one who got away, the one you want to punish just a little bit. The merchant explains the effect. When you write a letter with scarlet hollow, the recipient reads it and feels fine. But that night they wake up in distress without knowing why. It is ink-based hypnosis. It creates a vague, gnawing anxiety. The ex-lover wakes at 3 a.m., heart racing, thinking of you, but not in a fond way. In a did I leave the stove on way. In a something is wrong with the universe way. It is psychological warfare delivered via stationery. It is the medieval equivalent of sending a we need to talk text and then turning off your phone for 6 hours. It is cruel. It uses the crushed bodies of beetles and the symbolic weight of tears to burrow into the reader's subconscious and plant a seed of unease. Historians debate whether these inks actually contained mild toxins, perhaps traces of mercury or lead, that caused genuine physiological symptoms of anxiety. If so, this wasn't magic. It was slow poisoning via correspondence. But the villagers didn't care about toxicology. They cared about results. They wanted their exes to wake up sweating, whispering their name into the dark. As you look at the vial of scarlet hollow, swirling red and thick in the bottle, you realize that love in this village has curdled. It started with hope, the pig heart. It turned to comedy, the turnips. It became chaotic, the geese. But now it is becoming malicious. It is about control. It is about forcing someone to feel, even if that feeling is pain. The villagers are exhausting themselves. They are bleeding, baking, sneezing, and writing their way into madness. They have tried every trick, every organ, every fluid. And yet, the village is not a happy place. It is a place of tension, of stiff necks and stained fingers. They need an exit. They need someone to show them that perhaps, just perhaps, the answer isn't in the jar or the oven. They need a moment of clarity. And that clarity is going to come from the most unlikely source of all. It won't come from a priest or a king. It will come from a monk who decides that he has had enough of human nonsense. A monk who decides that the only thing worth loving is something that photosynthesizes. We are heading to the monastery, but we aren't going to pray. We are going to witness a breakup. A breakup not between two people, but between a man and the entire concept of human interaction. We end our tour of medieval mismanagement in the quietest place in the village, the monastery garden. The walls here are high and made of gray stone, designed to keep the world out, but they do a terrible job of keeping the absurdity of human nature at bay. You are standing in the cloisters, watching a monk named Brother Oswin. Oswin is a man of patience. He has spent 20 years illuminating manuscripts, painting tiny, perfect borders of gold leaf and lapis lazuli. He understands delicate work. He understands silence. But lately, the noise of the village's romantic panic has breached the walls. A frantic villager, possibly one of the victims of the Scarlet Hollow ink, threw a crumpled piece of parchment over the monastery wall, hoping for a prayer or an exorcism. Oswin picked it up. He is holding it now. It is a love poem written in human blood. It is sticky, poorly rhymed, and reeks of desperation. Oswin reads it. He looks at the dried brown smears that were once vibrant red life force. He reads the lines about burning hearts and eternal binding. He sighs. It is a sigh that rattles his ribcage. They are trying so hard, he whispers to the empty garden. They bleed, they bake, they sneeze. And for what? For a feeling that changes like the wind? Oswin looks down at the bench beside him. Sitting there is a clay pot containing a fern. It is a simple plant, a common polypody, with feathery green fronds that unfurl in slow, mathematical spirals. Oswin has named her Verena. Verena does not demand blood. She does not require poetry. She does not need pig hearts buried under her roots. She just needs a little water, a little shade, and the occasional nod of acknowledgement. She grows. She exists. She is perfectly contentedly alive, without the need for theatrical suffering. Oswin experiences a moment of profound theological shifting. He realizes that the villagers have it all wrong. They are trying to force love into existence through violence and biology. They are trying to hack the system. But love, true divine connection, isn't about control. It's about growth. It's about being like the fern. Divine love grows in the earth, Oswin declares softly. He stands up. He doesn't pack a bag. He doesn't say goodbye to the abbot. He simply picks up the clay pot. He holds Verena with both hands, like a holy chalice. Come, Verena, he says. Let us find a quiet hill and photosynthesize. He walks out of the monastery gate. He walks past the bakery where Eloise is still scrubbing flour off her table. He walks past the church where the smell of sneezewort still lingers. He walks past Thomas and his entourage of geese. He ignores them all. He follows the fern. As he reaches the edge of the village, he passes the forge. The blacksmith, a man known locally as the Goat Whisperer, because he spends more time talking to his livestock than to people, is leaning on his anvil. He watches Oswin carrying the plant. The Goat Whisperer spits on the ground. He has seen it all. He saw the ox blood boots. He saw the turnip romance. He wipes his hands on his leather apron and delivers the final verdict on our story. They don't want love, brother, the blacksmith calls out, his voice rough as gravel. They want proof. Oswin stops. They cut themselves and bake tongues and write in blood because they are terrified. The Goat Whisperer continues, scratching the ears of a goat that has wandered into the forge. They want proof that they can make someone stay. They want to overcome fate with poetry and beats. They want a receipt for their affection. Oswin nods slowly. And the fern? Oh, the fern just is, the blacksmith says. That's the only proof you need. Oswin smiles, a genuine, unburdened smile. He walks into the forest, disappearing into the trees, leaving the chaos of the village behind. And as he fades into the green shadows, you, the observer, are left with the realization of what we have witnessed tonight. We have seen a comedy of errors driven by a tragedy of insecurity. The villagers thought that love was a transaction. They thought that if they paid enough in blood, in turnips, in dignity, they could buy a guarantee. They treated romance like a spell to be cast, a mechanism to be operated. They forgot that people are not locks to be picked. People are messy, allergic, confusing, and wonderful. The narrator, me, and you, watching this unfold, realizes that true love needs no blood. It needs no ritual. It needs no dead pigs or drunk cousins. True love is the boring stuff. It's sitting in a room with someone and not needing to speak. It's sharing a bowl of pottage without poisoning it. It's the awkwardness of saying, "I like you," without checking to see if the moon is in the right phase. It is the quiet, resilient growth of a fern in a clay pot. The magic wasn't in the ingredients. The magic was in the attempt. It was in the hilarious, human willingness to try anything, absolutely anything, to connect with another soul, even if that attempt ended in a sneeze, a honk, or a very confused root vegetable. So let us leave them there. Let us leave Barnaby recovering from his swoon. Let us leave Beatrice happily married to herself. Let us leave Thomas preening his geese. They are all, in their own strange way, trying to find warmth in a cold world. And really, aren't we all just looking for our own version of a supportive turnip? And now, the village begins to fade. The sun has long since set, and the heavy velvet curtain of true night has fallen over the cottages and the fields. The fires in the hearths are burning down to glowing embers, casting a soft, pulsing orange light on the sleeping faces of our cast. The chaos of the day has settled into a deep, rhythmic silence. The geese are asleep in the garden, their heads tucked under their wings, dreaming of clear water. The turnips are resting in the cool earth, safe from emotional projection. The ox stands in the barn, his breath misting in the cool air, chewing slowly, steadily, a metronome for the sleeping world. You can feel the tension leaving the air, the striving, the panic, the desperate need for magic. It all dissolves into the darkness. There is nothing left to do. The spells have been cast, and they have faded. The ink is dry. The blood has washed away. All that remains is the simple, heavy comfort of rest. Imagine yourself drifting up from the muddy streets, floating above the thatched roofs. The smoke from the chimneys rises in straight gray columns, disappearing into the vast, star-speckled sky. The air is cool and clean. The smell of the village, the wood smoke, the damp wool, the earth, becomes a faint, comforting memory. You are moving away from the history, away from the stories. You are moving into a space of pure quiet, a space where there are no requirements, no rituals, no need for proof. You are just here, safe, warm. Let your breathing slow down, matching the slow, deep breath of the sleeping world below. In and out, slow and steady, like the turning of a great wooden wheel. There is no magic needed here, just the heavy, soft blanket of sleep pulling you down